The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
Oh, get in.
I'm go for go.
All right. Okay.
Roger, Roger.
Ugh, I hate that movie. All right. Welcome to the Fantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and a sea of comics. I'm Noah.
Kayla.
And Jared.
Yay! Side note, we had technical difficulties because we're recording in different places because we moved and we're not in the same room anymore.
No,
But we got
I
it.
know. It's so hard, though.
Noah and I are in New York.
Yes.
And Kayla, for a short time, is in Texas.
And then I'm moving to Scotland for a year, so that'll be super fun to try to line up the times.
Like, you just had to outdo me in moving, didn't you? Like, I mean, I was like, yeah,
No,
I'm
yeah.
moving to New York. And you're like, I'm going to Scotland. I'm like, okay.
No, that's totally what happened, because we would talk about moving to New York all the time, and I was like, oh, well, Noah's finally achieved his dream without me. I guess what?
I'm excited that because Kayla's going to Scotland, it means from now on in the show, she will be drunk. And that is good.
Or just stressed out from graduate school. But, you know, kind of sounds the same, right?
I mean, one will lead to the other inevitably, right?
All right. So today we are going to be talking about super alien villains?
Yes.
Alien
Super bad aliens.
Yes. Super villains that are aliens.
The only thing greater and more super than their villainy is their alienhood.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. No, but it was kind of inspired by all this. Sorry if anybody's really into this, but the bullshit, the raiding of Area 51. And we're like, you know what? What if, like, Parallax is there and, like, they release him? Like, what? Does not sound like a good idea at all.
Yeah, that actually brings up an interesting paradox about these people. It's people that are so into like aliens and sci-fi that they're interested in invading Area 51, but then they've learned nothing from the very movies that they pretend to love, because this is clearly what lets the evil alien out to kill everybody.
Excuse me, have you ever played like a sci-fi video game? You can romance aliens in that game, so I can't speak for everybody, but I'm super
ever the
excited.
optimist.
I'm excited to spring my alien boyfriend, is all I'm saying.
This isn't Mass
Kayla
Effect.
being this is Kayla being very optimistic. Is what this is.
I'm just giving you my reason for going.
I mean, you're going. You are signed up and you are going. You're not really going to Scotland, are you? You're going to Area 51.
If Scotland is code for his home planet, my future husband.
Yeah, I mean,
I just love. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, I mean, y'all have seen E.T. E.T. was terrifying. I'm sorry. I don't care if people think that was a good movie. He was terrifying. Like, I don't want any of that running around. I'm sorry. Like, no.
And I'm sorry that in the scenario where apparently we're being attacked by bloodthirsty aliens, Kayla's like, "Ooh, let's kiss it." Or whatever.
I'm just saying, my Garrus is out there somewhere.
Aw. Yeah, so, I mean, we thought it'd be cool to not... I mean, we could have probably done superheroes that are aliens, but we haven't really done a villain episode in a long time.
Oh yeah, Jared was like, "Hey guys, how about we do bad aliens instead?" And we're like, "Cool."
Well, we just did Boy Scouts, so I thought let's give villainy another look.
I mean, I am
that.
totally fine with that.
I was gonna
that's
do
my
the same one
wheelhouse.
regardless.
Yeah, you have that one character that could go either way. But yeah, I mean, I think so. I guess we should talk about just generally, you know, how aliens are. I mean, there's really no like fact or real ones to go off of, or that we know of. But how they're kind of done in comics and like what they mean and the symbolism behind them. I know Jared had a few things he wanted to say.
Yes. And so we've clearly seen like just about, I mean, you know, there's just the alien part, like Superman and Silver Surfer and all these characters that like the explanation for their powers is just they're from beyond the stars or whatever. But the other thing I think is interesting to think about in reference to this and to, I don't know, at times even sort of worry about is that, you know, in not just in comic books, but in sci-fi generally, you know, aliens are often a metaphor for immigration or, you know, in the negative aspects, xenophobia, you know. And it's certainly, I mean, not just in superheroes and or superhero drama, horror movies and have had a, you know, a part of that too. And so, you know, I want to sort of put a marker here because we love these characters that we're going to get into, but we do have to be careful about the fact that in some sense, especially in their origins in the 50s and 60s, they could be almost nasty allegories for a fear of the other or something like that.
You mean kind of like hella racist?
Yeah.
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 I mean, and yeah, and I think that's a good point to make because depending on how they were written or who brought them up, it could be a good one, like saying like this is probably what we shouldn't do and stuff, especially with people that are different from us or come from different places. But there are some stories where it's like, okay, you're a little murdery with anything that's not the same as you. I don't think this is the right way to go.
Well, I'd say to horror movie, or sorry, to comic book credit, unlike horror movies, at least there's been a kind of positive and negative take on this insofar as it's an immigration allegory, because clearly a lot of villains, but some of our greatest heroes are obviously, you know, let's say Kryptonian or something like that.
I haven't
so
heard of
it
this
isn't
person.
the case. Yeah, it's he's very obscure, but he's I don't want to go into the name, but he is he's super, he's a man, and but yeah, so I think there's definitely been good and bad on it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that comes with the territory of making, you know, the other or making something that's different. I mean, there are stories in comics where there's literal alien refugees trying to find a place to call home or just for safe haven or asylum. And they might have been misunderstood, and you know our heroes or the Justice League or Avengers or whatever might see them as a threat when they're really just trying to find a safe place to go. So I think it is interesting in how they write that and how they interpret it in a certain way. I mean, we have a huge stories. I mean, I would like when Brainiac, you know, invades. I don't think he's looking for a nice home or anything like that. Like, I mean, he's out just to destroy. And I think it's funny that a lot of it centers around Earth. I mean, there's definitely different stories that are in other planets, and we saw that with I think it was Infinity War, yeah, with Gamora's people. But I feel like if it doesn't have to do with Earth or there's not an Earthling involved, it's kind of sometimes how it's written. It's just kind of like, okay, feel sad for this moment, but you know they're kind of just nameless faces that are going to get wiped out or enslaved anyway, and that's not what matters until they meet up with, you know, Hal Jordan or somebody like that.
I mean, yeah, to appropriately introduce an alien, good or bad, into comics would require a lot of, unless it's like my whole planet was destroyed, like you know that man of super whatever. Where you don't have to explain the culture or anything like that. It's a lot of world building, I'd imagine, that goes in with a completely alien society. So I feel like that's probably why it's written so lazily most of the time. It's like, oh, look, it's Starfire from this faraway planet. You don't ever really go there, though. Maybe once in the 60 years she's been around. But
That's actually a good point, because a lot of these characters you only know for what they show when they're on Earth, and half the time, I mean, there's a lot of aliens where their places of origin still exist, but you don't really ever see it. Yeah, I mean, Starfire is a really good example of that. But, I mean, most of the time, villain or not, when they introduce a character, it's like, yeah, my whole world was destroyed, or, like, half the people were killed, or everybody's enslaved there. It's like, geez, like, is that really the only story we get with aliens? Like,
I mean, there are definitely a lot of different kinds. I do want to mention, it is funny because, like, you sort of mentioned, like, this distinction of, like, you have villains, or sorry, so you have aliens, and they're aliens to our planet, and they come here, so there's a lot of, like, this sort of invasion stuff that goes on. But there's also just, like, sometimes you'll be reading a sci-fi epic and it takes place in space and they never come to Earth, but like, so are they aliens? They would be aliens to us. Like Darth Vader is an evil alien. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just think it's interesting. A lot of time, like, and it was funny, like trying to come up with characters that we thought exemplified this really well. It's like, well, they're aliens because they're not on Earth, but I don't think they've ever been to Earth.
Yeah, that's a good distinguishing factor, because technically, if we were to go to their planet, we would be the aliens and they wouldn't, but we would think of them as it goes both ways. It's perspective.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because I imagine that most comic book readers are, in fact, human, like Homo sapiens. So
yeah.
I don't know.
We all come in with the point of view of, like, that's the other, just simply because, like you were saying, we're all human. So it doesn't matter where we are. We're going to be like, oh, they're different from me or us.
Right. Yeah, and I think I really feel like, especially with the Marvel movies that have come out recently, or showing these new aliens called, I don't know, the Skrulls, something like that, I really feel like they're going to be playing a big part in the universe. I guess,
oh yeah,
spoiler if you haven't seen the latest Spider-Man movie, but Nick Fury's with them, so I would assume that they're going to be playing a big part in this. So we should be getting a lot more cosmic stuff going on. The Eternals are going to be introduced, so I'm pretty excited for that. I'm liking this, like, kind of off-world, kind of mysterious, not knowing what direction they're going to be going.
You would.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, that's really, even though that's a direction they're going in. I mean, if you look at what we've seen so far, it's we don't think about it because it's not the main genre, but both the DCU or whatever and the Marvel in the MCU have been plagued with aliens, like the Chitauri. It was a full-fledged New York invasion in there. And obviously Thanos is an alien, an evil alien. And I mean, I think this is interesting too. Like the new gods, I think, are in some sense mythological, but I mean, from the perspective of everybody in the Justice League movie that's like a civilian, like they got invaded by goddamn aliens.
Yeah. I mean, they did.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not wrong for thinking that.
And it's funny too, because I think it's worth just for a few moments, like thinking about like that these stories actually do come in a lot of different varieties. There've been a sort of like, there's all kinds of different, like, I mean, just like aesthetic manifestations of this sort of thing. So like in comic books, I think a very popular thing, and I'm sure we can think of a lot of examples, is like the alien warlord that comes to Earth. It's usually a guy with a big shoulder pads, probably maybe an axe and a laser gun or something like that.
Well, and that's what all of his people look like and act like. I just picture, when I think of like aliens in comics normally, I'm just picturing a race of everyone that looks the same, and they're all in battle gear and having guns or swords or axes, and they come, and their only cultural significantly like defining feature is that they like to fight and conquer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's typically how they are written. I mean, there's literally a whole planetoid called War World. That's what they do. They go planet to planet, capturing people to have them fight.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's usually how they write them, and I think you do have to have, characters like that. I mean, Secret Wars is a good example of like kind of putting these characters in interesting situations that are, in every sense of the word, is completely alien to them. So I mean, you have to have those. I mean, it's just a trope, but I mean, I don't know, Thanos wouldn't exist if we didn't have that.
Well, and what you mentioned with like the Secret Wars and the War World thing is like a broader sort of sci-fi trope of like alien abduction, but we're thinking of it through the superhero lens. So it's like it's superheroes getting abducted, and it's like, well, what do we do with these superheroes now that we've abducted them? Now that we're aliens, well, we make them fight.
Or they eat
that's
them.
a pretty common.
One of the two.
There's also, I think is interesting, there's the colonizer, which you see in a lot of this too. Like there's different kinds of like the Kree and the Skrull, which are both coming up pretty big for Marvel, but also like Zod from Man of Steel. Like that's a kind of evil alien superhero story where the idea is not just, oh, we've run afoul of an evil, powerful alien, but specifically they came here to take over a goddamn planet.
Well, they came to make it their planet because their planet was destroyed. That's where the terraformers came in. So that's actually a pretty good point. they're like, this is a pretty rock. Let's kill everybody and make it our own. Yeah. Did you guys want to get into your spotlights? 'Cause
Well, I wanted to mention one more beforehand, and maybe it'll go into one of our spotlights. I think another trope here is the kind of like infestation alien story. So it's because a lot of times in supervillainy, we think of characters that are sort of like articulated, charismatic, intelligent creatures, much like us, but more powerful. But there's also the other side of this, which is like sort of the xenomorph, the kind of creature alien that comes and takes over, the Brood and the X-Men and stuff like that. Or maybe, I don't know, like maybe a kind of liquid character that's like a symbiote or something like that. You know?
Yeah, I mean, well, the parasite, the invasion of the body snatcher type thing, the one that needs a host or likes a host. I don't know if they need it, but they like it.
Oh, is that my cue?
I think that's
your cue.
Okay, perfect.
It couldn't have been more obvious if I threw the letter Q at you.
Well, from this distance, it would have been very impressive. But
Thank you.
when I found out we were going to be doing aliens, I had just recently, like within the last month or two, watched the Venom movie for the first time.
Oh,
So
how'd you like that?
I really liked it. It was so fun.
Yay, me too.
I know, right?
Me three.
Yay! But yeah, no, when we were like, well, let's do aliens in comics, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do Venom. And then you were like, I don't know, maybe we should do bad aliens in comics. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to do Venom. So guess what, guys? I'm doing Venom. Because I think he's very interesting. So a little bit of his like publication history, because I like that. His first appearance, just as like a symbiote, liquidy form, was in the Amazing Spider-Man number 252. It was in 1984. And he hadn't gained the name Venom yet, because what defines it, of course, is when he fuses with a host, and it's like, hey, I've decided to become Venom, and that's our hero/villain name.
It's like Brangelina.
Yeah.
It's like their couple.
Exactly. When they fuse, that's when Venom happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So he didn't actually gain the name until like 50 issues later in 1988. And then he didn't get his own solo run until 93. So, it's been a slow go for Venom, but he's always been a popular character. So he eventually made it to his own solo titles, which is fun.
That wasn't that long ago for a character that's
right?
like
I was gonna
so
say,
popular.
in terms of characters that we normally spotlight or deep dive or even just talk about, Venom is relatively new. Like I said, it's kind of an 80s, 90s thing.
Yeah, he's in like that Ghost Rider, Deadpool, Cable, like we think of them as really important classic characters, but that in the long comic history, they're relatively recent.
Yeah, they came out from the edgy, dark, violent period of time in comics.
Yeah.
But he comes from an unknown planet, no name, because of course we don't care about that. But Venom was kind of an outcast from his own society because, obviously, like you had alluded to, there are a bunch of parasites that need a host to survive. And typical symbiotes will fuse with the host and fatally kill them because it drains their adrenaline, and then find a new host. And Venom was like, how about I bond with my host and commit to it, and we both have a mutual relationship and continue to survive together. And they were like, you're crazy. You need to...
I mean,
so he was just kind of...
that's kind of cute. Like, I mean,
Right?
that's nice of him.
So it turns out that the Venom symbiote is like the Martin Luther King of his planet.
Well,
Pretty much.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I just think he was probably more chill. He was the hero of his planet, I guess, from our point of view, because he wasn't mad into killing the host. Because I guess, even if you just think of it from a logical point of view, you would survive or last a lot longer if you don't fatally kill your hosts every two days.
Yeah, I mean, it's like John.
Yeah.
It's like the thing. Like, I mean, you're gonna run out of hosts if you keep killing them. Like,
Exactly. So he was like, guys, and they're like, no, you're weird. You're crazy. Stay away from us.
That's the problem with mindless alien parasite creatures. Like, they're not forward thinking. That would be the main problem with them.
Yeah, all of his people totally stuck in the past. So when he arrives to Earth, actually, of course, that's when the story picks up. And his power set kind of includes basically all of the powers of the first human host he had, which was, guess who, guys? Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Yeah. So he has most of Spidey's powers. He's like a limited shapeshifter, autonomous defense, so he doesn't really have to think about it. It's very defensive. And he's also, which is what makes him one of Spider-Man's probably more deadly villains, is that he's undetectable by the Spidey sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, they're like, maybe it was because he got, like, that happened when he got Spider-Man's powers, or, you know, when they were fused. But that's, yeah. He's undetectable by the Spidey sense. And that's, yeah, exactly. Because comics. And that's like 50% of how Peter Parker's still alive is the Spidey sense. So, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's really interesting about that, do you remember the writer's name that created Venom? Do you have that information?
I don't have it written
with
down.
you?
I can't remember.
That's fine. We'll get it later. I just remember reading an interview with him where he said that's how the story began for him. That he created Venom with the idea of, like, what if there was a character that couldn't be detected by the spider sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, oh shit, you know, for Spider-Man, that's pretty lethal.
Yeah, so it's like he got that idea and then sort of built a story or like a character after it from that inspired idea. I just thought that was really cool.
No, yeah, that is very cool. But yeah, so I mean, Spider-Man / Peter Parker was Venom's first host here. Obviously, it's not his longest running one, and Venom's had a lot of different hosts while he's here. The most famous one being Eddie Brock, and that's probably my personal favorite in terms of like where the Venom stories go. And they bonded because they both hate Spider-Man.
Yay!
Eddie was like a reporter, and he at the Daily Bugle with, you know, Peter, and he was like, I've come to the conclusion that this person is bad, and he wrote a whole article about it, and Spider-Man was like, actually, he's a compulsive confessor, and it's this guy. And Brock's reputation was like completely ruined, and I don't know why, but that was a major trigger for Eddie to be like, Peter Parker / Spider-Man is my arch nemesis. I hate him forever.
Yeah, I think it's so funny that their rivalry started at work. Like, he was just mad that Peter got better stories. Also, I mean, he was Spider-Man, so he's kind of cheating a bit. But it's like, you want to kill this guy? Like, I mean, come on.
Again, it was more of like he thought his reputation as a reporter was completely ruined when Peter was like, actually, it was this guy. That guy is innocent.
Yeah. He was disgraced by mild and polite fact-checking.
Exactly. So anyway, mortal enemies. And then Venom was pissed because Peter Parker rejected him, and he took it personally. So since then, they've kind of been reluctant allies, kind of friends, just depending on the story.
Of the two, I actually think I agree with the symbiote's logic more. Like, I'm more sympathetic to, like, oh yeah, that's basic rejection.
Yeah, of course.
You know?
Well, and Venom has to take it personally because it's like, hey, bitch, I'll die without you, you know? So.
Yeah. Also has to take it personally because, like, you're the only person I've ever met, so I'm pretty sure it's personal. And then the opposite, Eddie Brock's motivation is just like, hey, I think you misspelled that word. I'm gonna kill you now. Like, okay, well.
You're not wrong. I kind of agree.
Yeah.
Venom has a more legit reason. But basically now, yeah, the main function of Venom, it's obviously become more complicated in recent issues. But from conception, just both of them being pals, hating Spidey, getting in his way, trying to kill him, sometimes besting him in combat, never actually able to murder. But I think one of the more interesting things and why I like Venom so much is he's kind of like a sporadic vigilante as well. He's kind of gone from like kind of the one-note villain that just hates Spider-Man personally and wants to see him destroyed, to, you know, like, I want to save innocent people, and then having trouble moderating Venom's just kind of like violence, inherent violence.
Yes, carnal.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like Eddie would be most vigilantes will be like, haha, I've bested the bad guy, let's take him to jail. Venom is like, I eat him now. He's dead. He has no head now. I did good, right?
And it's a cool idea too, because it's like, so there's always like alien stories are always like a combination of the alien and the human intersecting. But in this case, this is a character where it's like they're the sort of ground floor, the ground zero for that interchange.
Yeah, exactly. And they have to, deal with each other's cultural differences, where Eddie's like, can we not eat human heads for like maybe a week? But I mean, Venom obviously has, and I know Jared was super excited to even bring up Carnage, but he kind of functions as Venom's kind of villain when Venom is acting as a vigilante or kind of just an anti-hero in general. So I don't know if you wanted to mention Carnage here, Jared. I know you were super excited.
Well, but for me, I just think it's interesting because like between the two of them, because we're talking about like alien villains, it's like technically Carnage is more of like, in the immigration sense, he's like a second generation symbiote American. He's not really an alien, he claims it so he can seem interesting at parties, but he's like, we know you're from here, okay? But yeah, I mean, just to mention, Carnage is like, and also, by the way, that's the big event going on in Marvel right now, absolute carnage and everything like that. I have high hopes. I think it's a bit too sprawling, but whatever. But yeah, so Carnage is the symbiote sort of asexual offspring of Venom.
Yeah.
So he's and he bonded to it's like a worst case scenario situation. so it's like instead of this thing bonding to a guy who's got a mild like sort of vendetta against a newspaper nerd, it's that symbiote attached to a goddamn serial killer.
Great.
So yeah, Cassidy. Cletus Cassidy, sorry, I almost forgot his name, was a serial killer, and Eddie Brock was shared a cell with him, and it just so happened to be the time that the Venom symbiote was asexually reproducing. He was pregnant, and he didn't tell Eddie, which I think is inconsiderate. It's like they
have communication issues.
That's gross.
Yeah, it's like, you can tell me about how you hate Peter Parker, but you can't tell me you're going to have a baby. This is wrong. But so that thing bonded with Cletus Cassidy, and it made Carnage and a more powerful, more horrifying, more closely bonded. Like they did this thing where the Carnage symbiote was actually inside of the blood supply of Cletus, so that it was even harder to separate them or something like that. So it was really, really terrifying. But like I said, not even technically an alien, so we homegrown terrorism.
Oh, great.
He was born here.
Yeah.
All right, but yeah, so Eddie and Venom have their differences, and eventually they want to part ways because I think Eddie's sick at the time, and Venom is like, I need a stronger host to continue to be myself and save people, quote unquote. and Eddie's recoiling kind of against the escalation and the bloodlust that Venom just seems to be getting worse and worse. So he goes to a supervillain auction, which I didn't know they had these. That's super nice and convenient.
That's an awesome concept unto itself.
Yeah, right? Supervillain auction. Everyone just gathers and bids on weapons of mass destruction and I guess symbiotes, because Eddie puts Venom up for sale. They obviously make their way back to each other. But... I totally forgot to mention, because Venom sounds super awesome, right? He has this major defensive system, but he is vulnerable to fire and sonic waves, as seen thus in comic and most recently.
He has to have some type of weakness, and it just happens that, fire and sound are his weakness.
Sound at a certain frequency. I can't remember what it was, but
it's usually just like really loud sound in the comics. Like it's like if it's like booming. Like I think the original story, Peter separates himself from the symbiote by like a church bell.
Yeah, because that's when Eddie and Venom meet in a church. How romantic.
Yeah, and disgusting. Also, just you didn't really mention the disagreement that the two had. The disagreement was one of them wanted to eat brains, and the other one was Venom. Okay. Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. No, yeah, I just, again, one of the main reasons I really like Venom in general is because there is this dichotomy of one, a human and an alien really having to work together to kind of just function and continue to survive. them bonding, the cultural differences, and obviously, I think in terms of villainy, Venom is pretty badass. So, yep.
I wanted to mention too, just real quick before we leave Venom, is that you mentioned the movie. You watched that recently.
Yeah.
We all like that. One of the things I thought was cool in that is that not only did it introduce that, Venom is one of many species, but there was also they had invasion intentions.
Yeah.
Because so it emphasizes the alien part pretty hard in that movie. Sometimes, in the comics, Venom's been around so long, you can read the story and almost forget where he comes from.
Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of people probably that don't read comics are just like, oh, that's the black-suited Spider-Man. With sharp teeth and a long tongue.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Gear number 2.
All right. So for my pick, I decided to do Larfleeze. And that... Don't laugh. He's amazing.
He's super gonzo.
So if you don't know who he is the sole wielder of the orange light of avarice, which is a Green Lantern villain. He has the orange lantern. He's the orange lantern. He's the only one that has it, which makes sense because avarice is greed. Only one person should be able to wield it. Just to give you a little backstory on Larfleeze, he was born to a family of farmers on a planet that I cannot pronounce. It's like Shipiklas.
It's pronounced Venus. We talked about this.
Yeah, but so he was born, he had like 16 to 20 other siblings. He was one of the last ones to be born. His parents hated him because he was apparently the ugliest one out of all of them.
Oh my god.
If you see these aliens, they're all ugly. So I don't know what made him the ugliest one. So his parents kind of just disowned him, didn't care for him in any way. Fast forward a little bit, he's traumatized and kind of beaten up by all his siblings, his army of siblings. This alien race called the Larkadins come and invade his world, forcing most of them into slavery. And
typical.
Yeah, I mean, other aliens enforcing other aliens into slavery and destroying their planet.
Noah, stop trying to make me sympathize with this evil character.
He wasn't evil to begin with. Anyway.
That's true.
So while in slavery, he's forced to mate with Bonkia, which is another person, or another, it's a female of his race. And they have tons of kids, but most of them are sold into slavery or put into working camps. Terrible. They're just making more people to work for them. Fast forward a little bit, Bonkina dies, and he gets super upset. He wants to escape where he is, so he pretty much puts himself into a corpse cart, and that corpse cart is being put into the incinerator, essentially. And that's where you find out that he's apparently immortal and cannot die because he does not get incinerated.
Oh, well.
So after that, after he fled, he ends up on this asteroid. He becomes a master thief. He steals an object that apparently belongs to the Guardians of the Universe, the people that made the Green Lanterns. But at this time, there are no Green Lanterns. There are just the Manhunters, which predate all of the Lantern Corps. He actually ends up stealing this, mystery box that actually contained Parallax. And the Manhunters know that. They go after him for that. And all the stuff he ended up stealing from this place ended up having a map inside the box, especially with Parallax, because who doesn't want Parallax on the loose? And this map led him to the Vega system. And to this temple. He had a whole crew of thieves, and inside this temple was the Orange Lantern. And that's
you're a real dirtbag when you have me rooting for the Manhunters, okay?
Well, so when they got to this temple with the Orange Lantern, the lantern made them all filled with greed, and they all wanted this for themselves. So he ended up slaughtering all of his crew so he could take it for himself.
Stand-up guy.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, and then once he got the orange ring, light, power, whatever you want to call it, he became super greedy and wanting, all the power for himself. The funniest thing about his story is that he's so old that he doesn't even remember what's true with his origin.
Oh my god.
So when he was first introduced in the Green Lantern New Guardians #3, it wasn't clear like where he came from, how old he was, but with this origin, he predates the Green Lanterns. So that's like, I don't know, like let's say like a million years. But Larfleeze himself has said, "Oh, I'm 1 billion years old." So it's like, okay, he's just so old that he doesn't remember. Like, I don't know.
I love that the Green Lanterns have in that mythos they have their very own Smeagol. You know what I mean? Because part of this story is you could just play that part from the beginning of the Lord of the Rings when Galadriel's talking about Smeagol, and it's like he stayed in the mountain for many years and it poisoned his mind. Whatever.
Pretty much. I mean, when he got the lantern and became, Agent Orange, that's what he called himself. So
Wow.
he's Agent
Creative.
Orange. He's the sole person for the Orange Lanterns. And the coolest thing, well, maybe not. I think it's really cool. You guys probably won't. Is that so? He has an Orange Lantern core, but they're not people. It's all the souls and essences of people that he's killed or captured, and that's his core. So
my
he's
God.
technically the only living, person in that core, and his army or his other members of the core are all like hard-like constructs or just soul essences of these people he's enslaved.
So he's murdered
Yeah.
people, and then they fight for him now in the
Pretty much.
afterlife. A chaining no
And then-
peace.
Pretty much.
Well, they're these sad copies almost. It's like not even really them.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like their facsimiles or something like that.
That's still pretty
And-
fucked up, guys.
Oh, it's deeply so. Larfleeze is an inherently like a rich character because he's like this character that's on its face really funny. And when they've had these massive like Green Lantern-y team ups with all the different cores, Sinestro and Atrocitus are very serious, and Larfleeze is almost silly.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you find out what his MO is, he is like the most despicable, terrifying character.
Venom
yeah.
kind of seems like a kitten in comparison.
Just a little bit. Okay. Oh, and so one of the biggest things about the Lantern cores is that they have oaths, and the Green Lanterns one and Brightest Day and Blackest Night. No evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light. Yes, I did memorize that because who can't?
Hell yeah.
That thing is just so inspiring. So
We should have said it in unison.
I was waiting for you
the
guys to join
podcast.
in. You guys didn't, but fine. This is the Orange Lantern one. So just keep in mind it's about greed. So, or the Orange Lanterns are about greed. Their oath is what's mine is mine, and mine and mine, and mine and mine and mine, not yours.
Are you serious? Are you lying to me right now?
No, I'm dead serious.
No, that's real. Yeah, that's in the comic.
I was gonna joke and be like, is it murder, 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 murder? But I mean, it was pretty close.
Very close. There was one that somebody made, and I'll just say it because it's like if Larfleeze had, I guess, the wherewithal to sit down and actually construct his government of his core and
Actually
come
make a
up with
cool
it.
one.
Yeah, and this one is, this power is mine, this is my light, be it in bright day or black night, I lay claim to all those who fall within my sight. Take what I want, this is my right. It's like, okay, that one's
Yeah,
cool.
that's better. I like that one.
If Larfleeze had writers.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's essentially Larfleeze. He actually did have his own comic run, which I think is really interesting, especially with, a villain and an alien villain. And that's where you really find out where his origin came from with him getting the map to the Vega system. But yeah, I mean, he's teamed up with all the other Lanterns, during Blackest Night and Brightest Day and all that. And he doesn't really have any other abilities aside from he has claws and fangs. That's just his physiology, but he's immortal. So I don't...
He's also just deeply, deeply powerful.
yeah.
If you think about it, he's got an entire spectrum of or not spectrum, but one of the colors. So I mean, he's almost as powerful as the entire Green Lantern Corps.
Yep. And there's only one.
That's the wonderful thing about that character is that he's both the silliest possible thing, and also one of the most powerful. So.
You know, one of my favorite things that you mentioned, and I feel like this isn't touched on enough, is like characters that are extremely old, like hundreds or thousands of years old. You would think more people would forget the details of their lives because it took place so long ago. So I actually kind of love the fact that he doesn't remember things.
Yeah, and he's even credited to say, so that origin he had in his comic, he's like, oh, like that's half true. It's like, okay, what part? What part's half true? Like that you mated with this other person and had like hundreds of babies, or like what?
He played the game of telephone with himself throughout the ages. He doesn't even know.
Well, yeah, I can't even remember if I had chicken or tuna salad today. And he's 1 billion years old, so it's probably, you lose track.
Yeah, I guess so. But that's Larfleeze. I like him. I like the evil lanterns. I think they're really cool and interesting.
It's my turn, supposedly. So I picked a character. He's one of my favorite characters, period. It just so happens to conform to this episode. And he's important because he's probably coming up in the MCU. And his name is Super Skrull. Yeah. Take that.
Dot.
His real name is a Skrull warrior. And if you don't know, the Skrull are those... the Marvel aliens that are green and have pointy ears and weird like acne chins, and they shapeshift. That's basically all you need to know. And actually, what's weird is like if you've watched the Captain Marvel movie, you probably have a sense of who the Skrulls are. So there you go.
Wait, you said you didn't say his name. You said his name is Skrull Warrior.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna get to it. So he's a Skrull, and his name that was the next part, and his name is Klurt. Or Clarit. It's transliterated as like KL''RT because in space there are no vowels, and I don't. If there are any Skrull listeners, by the way, I don't speak fluent Skrull. I took a couple years of Skrull in high school, but you know how that is. So sorry.
I like how they have apostrophes though. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So the concept is the Skrulls actually in Fantastic Four comics go way back. The second issue of Fantastic Four was them fighting the Skrulls because back in those days, the superhero thing hadn't completely taken off, and they were still really like a sci-fi book. So them fighting aliens was it's what you'd expect or whatever. But that original Skrull adventure in Fantastic Four #2 was an intended invasion by the Emperor Dorek VII. You guys are sure familiar. He was the Jimmy Carter of the Skrulls. Anyway, so here's the thing. He was absolutely appalled that these backwood earthers were able to stop the invasion. So he was really pissed when it didn't work off. So he commissioned the creation of the Super Skrull, right? So he takes this warrior, Klurt, who I'll get into a little bit in terms of what his character's like. But the basic concept is, and he gives them the same powers of those very earthers that thwarted the plot to invade the planet. So the idea is that the Super Skrull has the powers of each of the Fantastic Four. So he's like, stronger than the Thing and stretchier than Mr. Fantastic, and he can be as invisible or more invisible than the Invisible Woman.
Yeah, because he's more stretchier. Whatever.
Yeah, and he's like. He's more flaming than the Human Torch. I guess that's probably poorly worded, but that was the idea originally. And then it kind of, by the way, over the period of time, has kind of scaled down to where he's more just as powerful as all of them, but he combines all our powers to use in like super creative ways. So usually the way he'll do like a stretchy hand punch, but the end will be like the Thing's rock hand on it, or he'll be invisible and also like burning people up with Human Torch's flame or something like that. But the visual to me is just, really, it's beautiful. It's so like Jack Kirby's Silver Age. I really think so. I think that there's something so cool about seeing like all of the Fantastic Four's powers in one green sort of thing. It's like a comic. in a sense. Like it's just something you'd only see in
He's
comics.
like the Megazord of
hopefully-
the Fantastic Four. That's what he is.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just such a striking image, and in a lot of ways, I feel like that's like a lot of things is sort of the thing that's propelled the character through the years, and he's been around for a long time. But I think he's interesting too because he's definitely this alien kind of warlord-esque character. But I find him interesting because we've talked a lot about like this sort of morality of like there's a lot of characters that are in the gray. But it's interesting to try to figure out how Super Skrull fits into all this because it's sort of like it depends on your perspective about whether he's a good character or not. Because he's this warrior who has like a warrior's code. He's noble, loyal. He does what he's told. He's virtuous. He doesn't like commit warlike atrocity or something like that. But he fights for an empire that's in the opposition of the Earth. Most of the time, so in that case, it's like how do you identify a character like that morally?
You can't.
I don't know if you guys remember, but like in what's that?
I said you can't.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, from the Skrull perspective, he's like their Captain America.
Which is an interesting concept in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. But regardless, and most of Super Skrull's sort of like stories have been kind of like that. So originally, again, he's just a loyal Skrull warrior, and he fights the Fantastic Four. But as they've gone and created more stories, oftentimes it'll be he will be sort of like he'll still have that code. The warrior code, but the Skrull Empire itself will have become decadent and evil or something like that. Like during Secret Invasion, the Skrulls are sort of taken over by one of their religious sort of like messianic sects, and the Super Skrull actually kind of rebels against them, saying that they've become evil or something like that. But yeah, so that's generally kind of the idea behind the Super Skrull. He's super fun. And he, because of the structure of those stories, there are times when he gets to be a, straight, almost good guy. Like during Annihilation, which I think is really cool. He was one of the main sort of protagonist forces against the bad guys. Mm-hmm. He ends up ends up like being like, how do I put this? Like, I guess it's you can say it like this, because Marvel has such a developed and interconnected sort of cosmic landscape. He ends up being a character that's not just like, one of the Fantastic Four's rogues gallery. Mm-hmm. He's just sort of one of the major cosmic players now. Mm-hmm. And as such, he's actually been like a villain for like Thor and Silver Surfer and Captain Marvel and Nova and stuff like that. So it's super cool. And lately, I think almost unfortunately, he's the ruler of the Skrull Empire. I'm not a huge fan of that. And the reason I say it's like it doesn't feel like it's legitimate character development. It feels like they didn't know what else to do with him. And I say that because he's done the same track as like all of his other characters that are sort of parallel to him. So, with the Shi'ar, you have got Gladiator. He was like their tough guy kind of character. Ronan was of the Kree, and the Super Skrull is like that kind of character for the Skrull, and they've all ended up just being the emperors of their empire. Because I guess I feel like
it's because they're the most like popular ones, or like the biggest name ones.
I think that's right. And I think what happens is these characters are like sort of villains at first, and they function as really, really interesting, scary villains, and then they're beloved by their fans, and so they want to see more of them, and they're then almost a demand to make them protagonists. You want to see them do cool shit and like beat the bad guy. It's like the T-Rex in the Jurassic Park movies lately. Have you noticed that? Like it ends up almost being a good guy.
Oh
most
my
of the
gosh,
time.
Well,
I
I
actually
think
really like that comparison.
I do think because you did touch on it a little bit, and a lot with these like alien rulers or dictators or villains, a lot of their motivations are like when they decide to switch sides, because it has even happened with Darkseid, is the whole self-preservation thing. So like a lot of them, especially since they're from, races that don't exist anymore, places where they don't, they're the only ones left of their alien race, that they have to like, okay, even though I'm sitting here murdering everybody, maybe I should like take it back a bit because I'm the only one left of my people. So I just think that's an interesting concept with them.
Absolutely, and what I think is really cool about the way that this character is sort of situated is that he can be both a good guy and or a bad guy given the situation, and you don't have to compromise the consistency of his character. So you can write a story where he really is, without apology, trying to destroy the Avengers or something like that, because of the whatever orientation is going on with the Skrull Empire. And at the same time, you can have a story where maybe one of the Galactus's heralds, the evil ones, goes rogue, and he legitimately fights him as a kind of hero character, but you've just got the same character. And I think that's really cool.
That is cool. It's like on the one hand, I love when characters kind of can transcend or rise above just where they were introduced as just like you had mentioned, like just part of the rogues gallery for the Fantastic Four. But I do think it's kind of unfortunate that for me, when you told me that he ended up ruling the Skrulls, it's like, what if, because you compared him to Captain America, I was like, what if we ended up making Captain America king? It's like, that's not who they are. They're the soldier. They're the loyal ones. They're like the enforcer as opposed to the ruler. So yeah, yikes.
Yeah, the dragon can't be the big bad. You can't really do that, at least for too long. And the truth is that I don't see it happening forever. I think with most of these characters, it's sort of like, it's a good almost like background status for them to be like, okay, they're in charge. That's what's going on with that empire. But I imagine next time a writer wants to utilize him, they'll probably take him outside of that. And how easy is that, right? Just like, he was disgraced because of some, political sex scandal or whatever it is. What have they got to do to get him off the bench?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see if we would actually see him in the MCU, because I know I don't know if they actually confirmed it or if they would most likely have the Fantastic Four in the MCU, but I mean, I think to even not just do the Doctor Doom story over again and maybe have something like the Super Skrull, because the Skrulls are already introduced, I think it'd be interesting, because a lot of people liked like Talos and like other like Skrulls that were introduced in there, so I think it's very
that would be
possible.
pretty cool.
You just made a point. You enunciated a dilemma I didn't see, but I think it very much is one. I wonder how they're going to fix it, because you're right. If they're going to do Skrulls, they're going to be dominant. Super Skrull is by far the most prominent Skrull.
Yeah.
Like, without question. Way, way more in the comics utilized and popular than Talos. Talos is great, whatever, but you're right, because he's in reference to the Fantastic Four. I mean, the whole visual it's going to be weird.
To have him without the Fantastic Four.
Absolutely. I mean, one solution, I think, is maybe when the movie comes out, you have Kl'rt in it, but he doesn't have those powers yet, and that maybe he doesn't get them until they've already sort of unveiled the Fantastic Four or something like that.
Yeah.
But like I said, in the meantime, I just think like he's just one of the coolest characters in Marvel's cosmos, because he's got a fun, like, kind of Klingon attitude kind of thing, and also just so cool to see somebody get hit in the face with a like stretchy rock fist.
You are stuck on that visual.
On fire. It is, because it's almost every Super Skrull trading card. It looks like that. But I should just mention the small stuff, and then he's also, because he's a Skrull, he can shapeshift. That's a big thing too, right? And a lot of his stories involve him like, oh no, this mailman is the Super Skrull or whatever. And and then also he's got hypnosis for some reason. It's a sort of thing he gets out of trouble a lot.
That is weird.
Hypnotize people. Yeah, I think a lot of the top level Skrulls can do it, because Pybok, the Power Skrull, another main Skrull. I know.
Do they just like put some like adjective or something in front of Skrull and be like, okay, that's my name?
Well, Pybok ended up being a kind of derivative character himself, but he was cool in his own right, because rather than having the power of the Fantastic Four, he had the power of a bunch of the X-Men. So it's just kind of cool. But anyway, yeah. So that's Super Skrull.
Yay. All right, comic book recommendation time.
Yeah, so for comic book recs, I say pick up Venom Lethal Protector. It's the first solo Venom title. It came out in 1993, like I'd mentioned. And again, it's Eddie and Venom paired together. The most recent ones, I can't remember his name, but he's not really... Anyway, it kind of follows... kind of the adventure or change from unambiguous villain to kind of the anti-hero. And that's part of my favorite part of Venom's character. So if you wanted to follow and see how that change happened, pick up Lethal Protector.
that the art on that, I just have to say, it's Mark Bagley, so good. It's one of my. I love that series. I grew up with it like in the '90s, and yeah, a great recommendation.
Yay!
All right. So mine, Larfleeze. It's going to be his run. Came out in 2013. It's by Keith Griffin. It's just about 12 issues, one trade. Yeah, I mean, you get to find out his maybe true origin. Who knows? He doesn't even know. So, really good read. But that's it.
For Super Scroll, I've actually recommended this larger compendium for different reasons, but it's a miniseries that was in the beginning of Annihilation, the big Marvel crossover. But it's called Annihilation Super Scroll. The writer was Javier Grillo Marcuach. I don't really know how to say his name, unfortunately. And the art was Gregory Titus. But it's really fantastic. It's a great story unto itself. It was sort of one of the first really impressive. It's a Super Skrull story starring Super Skrull. That's very rare generally. But it sort of showed him as this sort of like noble warrior who, all the same, was sort of willing to do the dirty job for the Empire. And it's a really good read, even outside of that larger crossover. That's really enjoyable. I think you'd like it.
Nice.
Heck yeah. All right. Well,
Thanks, guys.
it. Oh God, again from this far away.
Hey! I just want to say thanks, guys.
Okay. Yeah, y'all heard them. All right.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the Fantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.